As I've gotten the chance to work with more reptiles more frequently, especially more species, I became very confident that pretty much any individual reptile could end up taming down or become tolerant to people. So whether that means that they start out being like angry or biting or defensive or musking on you, hissing, whatever, over time, no matter how long it took, if you continued working continuously, any reptile would eventually get to the point where they could be interacted with or hand-fed or even handled without it freaking out. But there have been a couple species more recently that have seemed to kind of change my mind on it. So unfortunately, I think I'm going to have to admit defeat because it seems like there are just truly some species that will never tame down. And today I want to talk about those. Also, behind me, it's kind of a mess. It's fine. Don't worry about it. We're just moving stuff, okay? Also, merchandise, there are some new designs. If you haven't seen the most recent video, the primary design on the site probably won't make any sense, which is this beautiful cactus tribute. Seriously, you don't get the joke if you haven't watched the videos. So if you want to check that out, you can go to GoHerpingShop.com. But if you're not a cactus fan for some reason, there's also just some nice, simple, clean Go Herping logo designs in blue and black. But I'm quite a fan of the blue, and it won't be around for as long. Yours will not be this wrinkly. It's just that I tend to ball my laundry up and throw it in the corner. So that's GoHerpingShop.com if you are interested. So to start as an example, let's talk about a species that I actually just did a video on, and that is my boa constrictor. Rosie, for example, is an animal I've only had for, I guess, less than a year, maybe? I forgot already. But she is actually 22 years old. So many snake species, especially boa constrictors, are known to be super docile in general. It's rare that you find one that's angry or defensive or will bite at you or anything. They're just overall quite a calm species, especially if you get them as young babies or subadults or whatever, because they have more time to get used to you and they really haven't formed a first impression of humans yet. So you get to kind of be that person that can calmly show them that you're not there to hurt them or anything. But the great thing about boas, especially the boa constrictors, like I said, is even if they aren't used to people, they tame down quite quickly, as I was told by a lot of people. I was a little wary of this, but even in my individual case, Rosie, who went from this crazy, angry snake, understandably, went to a perfectly calm, like, sweet baby in a matter of about 3 weeks. Now, this is very fast for a reptile to tame down and become used to you, but that kind of shows you one side of the spectrum. And then somewhere in the middle, say, just ball pythons, another simple species. They're the same. Generally speaking, they are quite nice, quite sweet animals, and they tolerate quite a bit with people. But if there is a snake that maybe was neglected or not cared for correctly, or if it was just an individual that wasn't as comfortable with people, with enough work, you can end up getting them quite comfortable to you. This is basically done with just repetitive handling as often as possible for pretty long periods of time to where it realizes that you're not there to hurt it. And then eventually, in pretty much every case, you're gonna have a very sweet ball python. And that's how it's been with these. Now let's move on to, say, my black rat snake. They are also known to be a pretty docile species. My individual, she's a wild caught, which I did like a really old video on wild caught. So although in most circumstances I wouldn't suggest getting a wild caught, which I don't plan on getting anymore, but I already have her, so can't do anything about that. But that's aside the point, that's just my disclaimer so people don't yell at me. We know they will anyway. But anyway, I've had Shadow for multiple years now, and she kind of understandably was not super happy with people. And over time, handling her multiple times a week, she became more comfortable. She stopped musking, and she wouldn't freak out quite as much each time you did something with her. Now, I started to kind of neglect that handling part, like all of her care was covered and everything, but I just wasn't taking her out as much because she would musk sometimes, and it was annoying. It was a deterrent, and it successfully deterred me. So basically, because of my slacking on that point, she kind of went back to not being a fan. But even that made me feel comfortable that all species at some point, with enough work, will not necessarily like you, but they won't mind you as much. And then I got my Savannah Monitor. Now, even Bonnabelle the Savannah Monitor has showed way more change than the species that have kind of been the worst in this video, which I'll get to, but I want to kind of go down the line. So Bonnabelle the Savannah Monitor, I am her third home as far as I know, and the first two kind of sucked. When I first got Bonnabelle, it was so difficult to work with her that you could not be in the same room without her being completely out of sight. As soon as you stepped in the room, as soon as she saw like your hand or foot, she was just sprinting across to the back of her enclosure. It was this really annoying enclosure, so it was really hard to work with her. I didn't handle her, but I worked and interacted with her daily for months and months, and she barely showed any change. But each month she did show a little bit of change. Like after the first month, even though she would hide from me at pretty much all the time, I was able to kind of tongue feed her from behind and she would take them. And then a month after that, she would actually kind of come forward while I was tongue feeding her, so she wasn't as scared, but when she was done eating, she'd run again. And then a number of months after that, she would still actually bask while I was still in the same room. So that was baby steps, but then when I opened the enclosure, she'd freak out and run. And you get the idea, just after each month, there would be teeny tiny little changes. So I was like, see, each reptile can still eventually tame down, like even if it's super slow and even if it's still happening with Bonnabelle. And then we got a plumed basilisk and some day geckos. They were from the same owner. They were actually free on Craigslist, and these are all known as display pets. I don't really usually like the term display pet because I don't know, a lot of people just say it and it's just because they're too lazy to work with their animal. I say as I like don't handle my rat snake. Day geckos were a species I was always interested in and I wanted one eventually. My logo is kind of a gecko and don't actually own any non-terrestrial geckos. I just have leopard geckos. So I was like, okay, it's perfect. I really like day geckos. They look really cool. I think I'm gonna keep one. And I did not understand just how much they hated to be handled. So much, in fact, that when we got them, there was some stuck shed on them, and so I had to get it off because they can have long-term damage if that shed builds up over time. And first of all, getting your hands on these is impossible. They are so fast, and they have surprising bites for just how small they are. But that's not even the problem. Once they were in my hands, they would still not calm down. They would flail everywhere. So much, in fact, that they ended up snapping their tails, like the skin ripped. Thankfully, there was no like blood. It wasn't a severe wound. It didn't need any like vet treatment. We just made sure it stayed clean and it healed up no problem. But these were just so delicate that you couldn't even handle them to work with them. So it was hard to say whether they would actually ever tame down. It seemed like they wouldn't because they never improved over the months that they were here. They've both been sold and rehomed, and the people knew that they are display pets. And then there's the plumed basilisk. She had a handful of issues, unfortunately. She had some problems with her tail, her knees, and her jaw. I won't go into all those problems today, but basically we went to the vet and we got some antibiotics and different stuff and creams and ointments that we have to apply, and it had to be applied daily. So you had to take this animal out daily. She's still being taken out almost daily, and it has been months. Now, thankfully, she's recovering quite well. Her knee's looking way better, her tail is growing back super well, and her jaw is basically solid, and she can eat no problem. We actually had to hand feed her for quite a long time. So hand feeding her and applying these ointments and handling her every single day for months. I was like, by the end of this, she's gonna be like the best plumed basilisk ever. She's gonna love being, maybe not love being handled, but she's gonna like, you can just take her out and almost play with her to a certain extent for whoever gets her. She's the exact same as the day we got her. We've had her since November. Zero change. Like 1% change, between 0 and 1% change from how we got her. It's how she's, I'm looking in this direction because that's where the enclosure is, and I'm just looking with her with an evil eye. I see you. You see me too. So she's in an enclosure kind of by the door, so every single time you come in the door, she freaks out and hides. We should probably move her. We're kind of tight on space right now. So yeah, basically the process is, you walk in the room, she freaks out. You open the enclosure, she freaks out. You take her out of the enclosure while she's freaking out. You have her like swaddled in this towel and she's freaking out. You're applying this like ointment. It's just like lotion basically. She can't feel it, but she continues to freak out. And sometimes she manages to slip away. As we've gotten more practice, that doesn't happen very often, but she definitely still tries to slip away. Am I out of focus? Have I been out of focus this whole video? And then when you're done with the treatment, as you put her back, she freaks out. Close the doors, keeps freaking out, leave the room, you hear her freaking out, and then it's fine. And it's this same routine every single day. So this is like, I don't know, some days it can be short, like just 5 to 10 minutes of doing this really quick to get it over with. But other days it just might take a little bit longer to check up on her, see exactly how she's doing and everything. And it's so crazy how there's been no difference whatsoever. These aren't even like invasive things. Like the carpet python, I had to inject needles into him every couple days. I had never done this before, and I'm sure it probably hurt a little bit more than a vet doing it. They only gave me like 5 minutes of training, but it's fine, it worked, and he's perfectly fine now. But the point is, he was the sweetest thing ever when I had to literally stab him with needles. And the plumed basilisk was just getting ointment applied to her knees. So my point in saying that is like, it's not like we were actually hurting her. If we were, then it would make sense that she was scared every time. But it was almost soothing. I'm sure it was to a certain extent, and still is because we're still doing it. And a lizard that I had so much confidence in that she would just show a little bit of difference made no difference at all. Now, you could say like, oh, maybe it's just this one plumed basilisk, maybe others will be better. But it sounds like pretty much all species in kind of that family, but that kind of lizard is just known as a display pet. And I guess they're right. I'm so sad. I really thought that she would someday just be like this cool, comfortable lizard, but I think I have to admit defeat here. There's just no hope. So out there somewhere, I'm sure there are some plumed basilisks that don't mind people. But it also looks like it's true that not every single individual will calm down. So you could say like, oh, maybe it's just the way you're doing things. It's possible. I don't think it would be. Like, I'm not the only person that works with her. There's basically 3 of us that work with a lot of the animals, and she hates us all. It's nothing personal. That makes me feel better, I guess. Not really. Like, even the green iguana, which is on this side of the room, thankfully it's still small, relatively speaking, compared to larger iguanas. Even this one has definitely improved over time. The issue with that one is it sounds like even if she improves, or he, she, it, they, even if the iguana improves over time with me or other people in the room, basically the moment we rehome her, people are saying she's just gonna like mentally reset and be back to how she was. So hopefully we can rehome her soon. She's not even on the site yet because we want to make sure she's at the perfect weight and perfect health. But she has actually showed improvement over time. And I don't even handle her as much as the others, even though I should be. So I'm still very surprised that a plumed basilisk is more difficult to tame down than a green iguana. So what's my point in talking about this? Well, basically it's that although I feel confident that the majority of reptiles can be tamed down now, maybe it isn't all, because I used to say all, no matter what. But now I feel like I can't get my hopes up 100% if we get an animal that's known to not be the sweetest on earth. And again, it's a pretty individualized thing. Like, let's look at leopard geckos. We've gotten so many geckos. I love leopard geckos so much. They're one of my all-time favorites. They're so sweet. I could have all of them. And the far majority of them are super sweet, adorable. They even like come to you. They'll crawl on you, no problem. But Goldie, my personal one that I got in 2014, he doesn't mind handling, but he also doesn't seem to like it. He gets kind of annoyed after just a few minutes, and it's just kind of a personal thing. Because I get to work with other geckos, I don't have to force him to like me. That sounds very aggressive. Even though he has also improved, just like many of the other animals, he's improved more slowly, and he never really got to that same point that other leopard geckos did. Like some that went through like so much abuse over time. It's just so sweet and loves people, even though people are the reason it's like dying. That's sad. But thankfully, we've done a good job of, not to flex or anything, but we've rehabbed them really well. And we're all rehomed to awesome homes. But that just kind of shows how it is individual, where one leopard gecko might just be more comfortable with another leopard gecko, even if you spend an equal amount of time. But there are just those that clearly show no improvement, and that it's at a certain point maybe not even worth putting them through that stress. Because if you have, say, a leopard gecko that's not comfortable, it's gonna stress out during those periods, but it's worth it in the end because it's going to live the rest of its life comfortable and not freaking out. But clearly the plumed basilisk goes through a lot of stress every single day, and now we only handle her because we have to continue her treatment, and once she's done with the treatment, she won't be handled. So it's kind of disappointing, but that's the moral of the story. Thankfully, there are tons of species you can get that are just known to be super docile, and you'll essentially have no problems with them. There's many that I've never heard of one just truly never calm me down over time. But my goal for this is to not guarantee to you that any species is going to actually like you at a certain point. So if you're maybe looking at, just based on the ones that we've worked with, are a day gecko, or a plumed basilisk, or a savanna monitor even, I wouldn't completely just hope on the fact that it will get better over time, because it's not always the case. But yeah, like I said, there's a lot that do, so just something to keep in mind. I thought that'd be interesting to share. Again, designs. Lizard design, there's blue and black of the lizard and the cactus. You can check those out. If you're watching this in the future, these designs might be gone, but hopefully there's more cool stuff on that site for you to check out. There's also posters, Go Herpian poster, there's 2 types of posters. Check them out. Okay, that's it. So I'm Alex, and thanks for watching.